Hi everyone. I'm Alex and I work at Cancer Research UK, just up the road. And today I'm going to be talking to you about how we've been exploring voice user interface for cancer prevention. And to give you guys some background about me, I'm currently on a technology graduate training program at the charity. So for the past 2 years I've been moving around different roles. And today this is one of the projects I was on in one of my previous placements. But first I want to talk a bit about Cancer Research UK as a charity. And what better way than with some audience interaction. So would anyone like to hazard a guess as to what this statistic might refer to? Sorry? Yes, exactly. So those who are born after 1960, 1 in 2 of us will develop cancer at some point in our lifetime. And that's essentially why as a charity we exist. So we have a vision, and that is to bring forward the day when all cancers are cured. And so far, research progress has been really good. So if we cast our minds back to the 70s, just 24% of people who were diagnosed with cancer were living for 10 years or more. That has now doubled, and we're currently seeing more than 50% of people survive. But we want to accelerate progress so that by 2034, 3 in 4 people are surviving cancer for 10 years or more. And we'll do that through multiple ways, but primarily these areas. So through funding research, so helping researchers and scientists find cures and better treatments for cancer. Through influencing policy, so this could be working with the government to pass different laws which will help prevention. And finally, to providing information both for healthcare professionals and for the public. And none of this would be possible without technology. And as a department, we have a huge responsibility at Cancer Research UK. As you can imagine, our online presence is integral to driving awareness and raising funds. And our remit for the charity is to drive value through both delivery and innovation. And so this could be anything from looking at our digital products, which are in-house built platforms like our online shop, or our events platform. It could be specialist scientific apps that we use that help doctors diagnose cancer sooner. Or it could be just the day-to-day technology our colleagues need in the office to get their job done. And it's also really important that we're aware of the tech landscape, and so internally we have a tech innovation team. And they have not easy, but quite a straightforward remit. And it starts off by understanding and identifying trends in the tech landscape. And this could be anything from a startup idea to some big hardware. When they think this might have some value, they then go through a test and learn process to understand if that could add value. And we use lean methodology, so for anyone who's not familiar with lean, it's all about kind of investing as little as you can whilst learning the most at the same time. And then for those ideas where we do see value, we then embed that into what CR UK does as normal work. And I joined the innovation team about a year ago now, and when I joined, one of the things we wanted to look at was voice user interface. And for those who don't know, that's the practice of being able to interact with technology through nothing but your voice. And we were interested in this for a number of reasons, but mainly around these. So the acceleration at which voice took off was phenomenal, and none of us really saw that coming. We were really interested in opportunities for accessibility. So without a screen, you're suddenly opening up the remit for interaction. And we thought, especially with our audience of kind of more old people, we could be looking at this as a great avenue. And finally, we thought if things were to continue in this direction, in the future, it would fundamentally change how our audience expected to interact with us. And so we wanted to take this through to the second stage of the innovation process, to do some test and learn. And we were thinking about different ways we could do some testing. And we initially thought, okay, we could look at fundraising for our supporters, we could look at campaigns, or we could look at cancer information. And when we got cancer information, we got some pushback, both internally and just within our team. And I think we were worried that society wasn't ready to talk about cancer out loud with machines. And then we realized that was a huge assumption, and it was our job to test that, and so we did. But even cancer information as a topic is massive. And so we decided to look at cancer prevention. An advantage to prevention messaging is that if we were going to build a test product, prevention stuff can be used for our entire audience, not just a single one. And as you can see, prevention is integral to our strategy. So in the UK, more than 4 out of 10 cancer cases can be prevented. And some of these reasons you might be quite familiar with, so smoking and staying out of the sun are quite well known, but a lot of these other ones people aren't very aware of. And so it's our job as a charity to drive understanding. And so when we looked at this, we thought, okay, this would be really suitable for what we're doing. And so lo and behold, we had this question. So how can we be using voice user interface to reach people with cancer prevention information? And in a traditional tech team, we could have gone down the avenue of doing a strategy and really in-depth user insights, but we thought, that's not for us. We want to stick with being lean. And so instead, in the space of just 5 days, we managed to map the problem, design a solution, build it, and test it with users. And we did all of that using a design sprint. How many people here have heard of a design sprint before? Wow, that's a lot. Okay, well, I won't go into too much detail about it. Anyone who hasn't heard of it, it's this process that takes you through mapping a problem to sketching and designing solutions, and then giving you something that you can build and finally test with users so you can learn. It comes down from a company called Google Ventures, which by no surprise is a side project of Google. And they documented everything in this book called Sprint, where they really go into the detail of how we should be running these 5 days to achieve the solution. And so I'm going to run you through what we were doing on those 5 days to reach our goal. So we started off with our problem, which is how can we be using Voice UI to reach people with cancer prevention information. And we quickly realized that this was huge, and we wouldn't be able to solve this in 5 days. And so instead, we wanted to narrow down into one specific area. And so we decided to look at alcohol. Alcohol can in fact cause 7 different types of cancer. And not many people know this. It's a very unknown link to cancer risk. And we thought that this would give a really good opportunity for us to look at. So on this first day, we wanted to understand how as a charity do we currently tackle alcohol. You may have heard of Triathlon, which is our 1-month campaign where we encourage people to go completely alcohol-free. As you can imagine, people that do that tend to spend the first day of the next month on a massive boozer, which isn't great for kind of continuous alcohol reduction. So we had this problem of how can we then drive continuous behaviour change. And so we spoke with internal experts that we have in our policy team, and they told us if we could get people to understand their own consumption and track that, that would really help people see that link. And so that kind of set the premise for the rest of the week. That allowed us to go into the second day of sketching. And sketching allows you to all go away separately, so there's about 7 of us in the sprint, and we were all designing our own solutions. And you do this anonymously, so no one's really meant to know who did what. And as you can see here, this is an idea called Alexa alcohol target. Worth noting that we chose to look at Alexa just due to the kind of mass uptake of Alexa, and the platform that Alexa is built on is really open to third-party usage. So this is an idea that allows a user to go through and set targets and add drinks, and so hopefully that person would see how much they're consuming. And then at the end of this day, you have a wall with loads of solutions, and everyone goes around and dot votes. And this is a process where you anonymously show your opinion on these solutions. And you might think that this solution is really great, I'm going to vote for it, but actually I want it paired with this. And so by the end of the day, you've got a really visual representation of the features that you want to include. And so when we had that, we were ready to take it through to the third day of storyboarding. And it's easier to get sidetracked and excited about everything, but you forget that at the end of the week, you need a product to actually build and test from. And storyboarding really begins to flesh out your product. And so here, because we were designing this voice interaction, we were looking at what is that conversation flow between the user and the device. And so as you can see here, there's kind of a few things the user's going through and then Alexa is responding. And this was to help our developer on the next day build that into a full product. And this is what we look like on the day. So this was the build day, definitely the most stressful of all the days. And you can see around the room we have all of that work we've been doing throughout the week. And we have on this board in the top right was our team charter and what we were trying to achieve that day. And interestingly, compared to design sprints where you might be looking at an app or a website, because we were looking at voice, the actual roles that we took on the prototype day were very different. And so these were the roles that we had in the room. Your typical user design and developer were very typical of a design sprint, but we had some very different roles which are actually really interesting. So we have something, I had someone who was doing intent training. If you imagine when you give someone an app, it's really easy for them to choose an option. When you're doing it through voice, you have to allow the user to say that out loud. But to give you a preview, one of the options the user could take was to add a drink. But they might not say add a drink, they might say add a drink, log a drink, track a drink, log a beer. And so you have to train Alexa to make sure that the AI picks up on all these different ways it could be said. And the other role we had was speech testing. Alexa needs a lot of hand-holding with speech. She's not quite there yet. Particular problem for us was that she would not pronounce our name correctly unless you wrote it like this. And this was a continuous problem we had, so we had to test everything. As you can imagine, as soon as you get one word wrong, it can really kind of blip user flow and that interaction. And so we had to spend a lot of time doing this testing. And when we've done all of that together, we finally had our final product that we'd made for the week. And so we made a skill, which is like an app for Amazon Echo, called My Alcohol Tracker. And that took the user through this journey, so they could set themselves a weekly unit goal. So we recommended they set 14 units, because that's a government guideline, but we allowed anyone to set their own. They can then add drinks to their tracker to log their progress, and then finally they can hear how they're doing. And in that bottom section is when we really start to feed in the cancer messaging. So when people ask for their feedback, we remind them of the link between alcohol and cancer, and that was what we were really trying to see how well that landed. But it's worth noting that we tested this on users in that week, and it went really well, got really good feedback. But what we tested wasn't a real product. The code was completely fudged, it made no sense, but it was just the MVP that we needed to release it on that day. But the user testing was enough to make us realize that this had some serious legs, and we wanted to really deliver it. And so we spent the next couple of weeks ironing out bugs and problems. We spent a lot of time down here doing some user testing, until we were able to actually release it into the public. And when we did, this happened. The press absolutely loved it, and that was great. We got loads of media coverage because we released it in line with Alcohol Awareness Week in November. And we had some really nice headlines about HCID UK looking into the link between alcohol and cancer and doing that through voice, which is really innovative. And it's a largely untapped space in the UK looking at health and voice, but it was really nice to get that recognised. This was obviously a complete vanity metric and wasn't actually the outcome of the project. And so what was most important was how our users were dealing with it. And so this is a little bit of insight as to how people use it. When we released it, so the blue bars are unique customers. We only had about 30 people using it a day. That's quite good for a test product, it's not bad. But as you can see, as soon as Christmas hit here, usage absolutely rocketed, probably due to how much people were drinking. But also in 2017, Amazon Echo was the most sold gift for Christmas. And alongside that, we can see the different actions people take. So in the pink is people setting goals, and in the dark blue is people checking their progress. And what kind of we wanted is to see more of this. So checking their status is where they get that cancer information. But it makes sense that people use that less because you only see your progress every now and then. But what was really nice was that you can measure through the analytics whether people are cancelling your intent, so whether they get halfway through and say, Alexa, stop. No one said that through check status, which is great. So it meant no one had ever interrupted the cancel messaging to end it early. And so from that, we felt that we could really begin to draw some insights. So we had some early indications that our audience was happy to use voice for health information, which was completely against our original assumption and was great for us to learn. We knew that the different user journeys made sense, so we had a lot of feedback from testing down here and with users in the office, and we knew that it was going really well. And finally, it was speedy to build. The turnaround wasn't long at all. It was stressful at times, but we got it done. And it really opened our eyes to how we could be using this platform to engage with people. But with all tech projects, there were issues. Retention on Alexa is a huge issue, and it's talked about a lot if you want to look it up. What we found was that we only had about 5% of users coming back week on week. And if we wanted to go back, and if you think how we were trying to drive continuous behaviour change, 5% retention means we're not really doing that. The average Alexa retention is 3%, so we are above it, but still, it's not ideal. So we're trying to understand how we can maybe leverage the Alexa platform to engage people better. And finally, we did have a very limited data set. So people could only add a selection of like 5 different drinks, which obviously isn't ideal, but when you're releasing a test product, we didn't want to spend loads of time looking into signing off different metrics for other drinks, because the process to sign off a drink is very long, and we didn't have the time to do it. So that was kind of the journey we've been on so far with Alexa and learning how we can be using it. In terms of what's next, for me, I feel like the gap is looking at specific audiences. So we tried to be quite bold and cover a huge audience with prevention, which I think was interesting. But what would be good next is to look at the individual audience we have, what are their needs, and how can we really be using voice and the unique interaction of voice to meet the needs. We're also looking at other things through like organic search, so how are people using these devices to interact with content more widely. And when we've done that research, we found that actually we're in quite a good position, and so we're currently trying to strategize around how we can deliver that. But that has been the journey, so that's kind of it. So any questions, please send them my way.
Thank you, Alex. That was fascinating. Do we have some questions in the room?
Did you invite the press when you launched?
A lot of it was organic, but we do have a press team. Our press team mainly looks at like 2 specific tech publications. What we found is that we got a lot of international coverage, which was nice, and we even had someone who like wrote a comic book strip about the interaction, which was cool. So it was largely organic, even though we did drive it, which was quite unexpected. We did have a lot of press around Alcohol Awareness Week more widely, which probably drove traffic to Cancer Research UK, and therefore kind of probably matched up pretty well.
That's my second question. How did you get people to actually install it?
How do we get them to convert?
No, because you have to install it, so you have to go to the store, you have
Yeah.
to look for it, you have to install it.
So we just kind of hoped it would happen. You can't. We wrote a blog post which is on our Cancer Research UK Science blog, which linked to the Amazon page, and we had other articles that were written which did link to the page. But it is a really difficult bridge to gap, is how do you get people to go through understanding something exists, to then going to Amazon, to installing it, to activating it. It's really long. So luckily it did just kind of happen. But it was definitely something difficult to drive, but we did get just people, I think people who used Alexa a lot knew the process they'd take, and therefore it just kind of carried on.
I'm just taking chair's privilege here. You talked about the retention issue, which I thought was really interesting. Do you think the retention would have been different if you delivered the app in a different way, or do you think it was because it was Alexa?
Yeah, potentially. I'm not sure if any of you guys were going to talk just now about voice and how frustrated people get with skills. I think Alexa is currently in a place, along with a lot of voice platforms, where they are novelty and people aren't looking to use them to actually intervene with their lifestyle. So I think it's partly due to that, but I think partly people didn't feel that it met the functionality. Our test was to understand how it was received, which was good. If our test was around uptake, I don't think it would have been as successful. But if we wanted to continue it and iterate, we would be looking a lot at how can we drive retention. But I know Amazon released a lot of incentives to developers that can get good retention on apps, because no one can do it right now.
Okay, cool.
How much have you considered context as a way to drive retention? Because one of the main downfalls of Alexa is that it's not mobile, but Google system is.
Yeah.
And if you think about drinking, a lot of it's outside the home.
Yes.
Yeah. Back to the device in order to log it. So,
yeah, it's a great question. When we started on this, we were going probably against traditional innovation process. So normally in an ideal world, in innovation, you'd have a problem and you'd find the appropriate solution. The purpose of tech innovation is to drive technology, and so we were kind of retrofitting. At this time, we knew where voice was going, and we knew that voice was going to go beyond home devices. Especially Alexa was starting to go into their mobiles. And our kind of assumption was that we were aiming this towards an audience that were mainly drinking at home, or people that would be happy to kind of log it when they got back. But we realised that wouldn't always work, especially if someone was absolutely plastered. They would not get home and talk to Alexa.
Or Alexa wouldn't understand.
Yeah, exactly. She's not very good at accents, that and swearing. So, yes, I think if you had it on your phone in a different context, that would be really interesting. What the issue is there is you're then competing against apps. So what is the advantage of voice on your phone against an app on your phone? What do people really prefer? Because there isn't really much competition, apart from maybe a laptop in the home. That's why we kind of felt that it was been an interesting test. But yeah, we'd like to see how it would change if we could do it on mobile.
Yes.
So, a silly question, a serious question, but I think it's kind of hard. Like, I was wondering if you had done any testing, like training with Alexa to do with understanding speech after having a few drinks?
No.
I'm like, oh, log one, and then 5 drinks later, I'm like, oh yeah.
No, sadly we didn't do it. We did consciously test on lots of accents when we were testing internally, but unless I think you work at Amazon, you can't train Alexa to do it. We didn't really have a choice to get around that. I do think Alexa is moving in a direction that it can understand people a lot better. I've seen personally over time, I generally lean towards Google Home. The speech recognition is accelerating really quickly. I wouldn't be surprised if in time it could understand drunk people. I guess that's the big dream. But I don't know right now.
But my more serious question was whether or not, I appreciate it's a small prototype, whether you don't consider anything like if you could say, like if you log so many drinks and you start to kind of say, well, hang on, I've got over my target, but then if you keep on going, whether or not there'd be anything like alert saying that you drank a lot, of things okay, like whether or not there'd be any kind of like safety net for people, I guess, or any kind of way of saying, okay, you need to do this and you need to do that.
Yeah. So interestingly, when we released the app on the store, we said to people, please email us feedback. And someone emailed us and he said, I just set my limit as 10 million units and you allowed it. Why? Which was a valid question, but the process of what was really interesting and quite nice for us is our technology team sits separate from policy. And we had in the sprint someone from policy the whole time, and so we had to make sure everything we delivered was in line with Cancer Research UK policy. And so the process it can take to sign something off is really long, and so we knew the kind of the pushback we'd get if we tried to figure out what the upper limit was. Yes, it would be nice to see if we could introduce that. The kind of middle ground which we did reach is that when people were a certain percentage below their limit, we did give a change of message. So if they were, if they had a limit of 10 units and they got to 9, we'd hit that message. But again, if they were on 50 units and they went to 45, they'd get the same experience. So we were trying to be a bit dynamic with how people got their messaging, because we appreciate some people might have a limit of like 4 units, and therefore we don't always want them to be told like you're already near your target, because it does really depend on the user. But with like further investment, it would be great to personalise that based on the individual and kind of, yeah. Exactly, yeah. It would be nice to see if you could start to understand the patterns of someone's drinking and know what that might be involved. Yeah.
Great, I think we need to wrap this up now. Thank you very much, Alex.